Well, rapid transit basically is a vehicle for moving groups of people on its own right-of-way, so there's no conflict with other traffic. That's what makes it rapid.
Right. This would be buses, subway, minibuses, moving sidewalks, anything in that line?
Well, it could be any one of those things. Generally speaking, there'd just be one system in a region or city. So if we have a rail system on double steel rails, which is the most common form in the world, that's what it would be. It might be partly underground, partly on the surface, or partly on overhead track, but it would still be this same kind of vehicle carried throughout the system. We employed a firm of consultants to make a study. When I say we, the study was paid for jointly by the Regional District Board and BC Hydro representing the provincial government. And the consultants came in with a projection of probable costs and suggestions as to the routes, but they didn't specify the type of vehicle because they said we should keep our options open until the last possible minute to see which, at that point, is considered to be the most efficient, most useful type of vehicle.
This is an interview with Dr. Julius Kane from the Department of Animal and Resource Ecology, University of British Columbia. Dr. Kane, I was wondering if you would comment on the rapid transit proposals put out by the Greater Vancouver Regional Planning Board.
Mostly, I can summarize my feelings in the matter very simply by saying I think it's as described in the transit report. I think it's going to be a financial and social disaster for the city of Vancouver if it's implemented the way it's structured as of the present moment.
Well, what are the faults in the structure now? And what should be done to improve it?
Well, basically, the proposal is somewhat vague about the actual direction that rapid transit should take within the city of Vancouver. But they have outlined a plan or a program which is probably really best described as being Victorian. Essentially, they're suggesting that a concrete octopus be superimposed in the city of Vancouver, with the head arms being located at Georgia and Granville, and then the tentacles radiating out from there. The cover of their report is a very graphic indicator of what they have in mind. You can see that basically it'll be something which will be 4 roads leading to Georgia and Granville. Now, mind you, I have no quarrel at all with the concept of rapid transportation or with public transportation, but this is a system which is really best described as being radial transportation. Radial in the sense that all of these are spokes leading to a central hub, making the whole area subservient, or basically serving one small downtown metropolitan area. There is nothing in the concept to promote regional transportation. For example, if you wanted to get out to UBC, which is somewhere here, there is no transportation network which would serve you. Likewise, if you live somewheres in Richmond and you wanted to go out to Simon Fraser, you'd have to take a train up to this hub, Georgia and Granville, and then take another train out to Burnaby, and then eventually make your way to Simon Fraser. In other words, this is not area transport. This is transport which is just centered on one particular small region. It would benefit only the particular property owners in this region. And I should point out that in this region, even without the radial transport, property values have been soaring quite immensely. And it's really hard to see why the planners want to repeat all of the mistakes of Chicago, New York, and all other centers of this type when they could draw upon the experiences of the decay that have been taking place in so many urban regions. Because what they're going to do is they're going to contribute towards ultimate decay and the ultimate ruin of everything that makes Vancouver a pleasant or a desirable place to live at the moment.
What direction does the thinking go now? What is the preference of the experts?
Well, at the moment, most systems that are in operation are on steel rails with steel wheels.
I'm not quite sure. Are you talking about trains, underground, above ground?
That's right. These are
both.
They're trains.
Trains.
They may not be drawn by an ordinary type of locomotive, but they are in effect trains.
Most likely electric in view of pollution.
They would be electric enough.
Well, it seems to me one thing about this, the proposed system that the Greater Vancouver Regional Board has proposed is that it's terribly inflexible, that once you've designed it, then that's it. And from now until forever, the city grows that way. And I think perhaps the bus system would have some advantages in being more flexible.
Well, the bus system has all sorts of flexible advantages. For one thing, it's not geared to a outdated technology. The radial system here is geared to a dual rail system, which is the sort of system, the commuter system, which was put in during the Victorian era. Now, there's no reason why your bus routes, as they become more and more popular, can't follow through the following evolutionary scale. First, you start deeding separate lanes for the buses, and you make them separate lanes by putting up little concrete dividers so that traffic can flow, and so immediately you can double or triple the effective flow of bus traffic, the so-called busway route. Secondly, there's nothing to stop your buses from going on overpasses or underground in certain selected areas if you find that you can cut down congestion. In other words, you can combine buses with a little bit of capital construction. You don't have to go to the $300 or $400 million figure, but there can be certain areas, for example, Georgia, Hastings, or Granville or Barad, where you go underground for 2 or 3 miles or so.
Talking about tremendous cost factors, don't we?
Well, the projected cost for the rapid transit part of the total transportation package is $300 million, based on today's costs.
Vancouver City.
Well,
or
it's to serve the region, but in fact, the projected lines would be, in the first stage up till 1990, confined to Vancouver, Burnaby, and the North Shore.
Mm-hmm.
That's as far as they would extend.
Right.
Eventually, as population increased, they would extend beyond that into other municipalities.
The transportation system that's being proposed for the city of Vancouver, and these are their own figures, they're talking about a minimum expenditure of some $300 or $400 million. Now, once you've got a $300 or $400 million investment in concrete and bricks and mortar, you've got a foundation which just can't be moved.
The thinking, I think, throughout, or most of the time, was to keep Vancouver proper, free of highways. Is that not correct?
Well, free of a multiplicity of highways. We had an expert up from the United States talking to the Board of Trade within the last 2 weeks. He congratulated Vancouver on being in a position where it still had options open.
Right.
So that we need not cut our city up with freeways that would destroy it as a reasonable place to live. We could go to other forms of public transportation.
We just have to look at San Francisco and even worse, Los Angeles, both cities I know.
He mentioned those, and also Seattle.
Seattle, right. You know, this intricate network which makes it a concrete and glass and steel city. So we do have the option open. Do you really believe that in Vancouver we will not get highways?
Oh, we'll get highways. We have some now. We'll get undoubtedly a few more. But the point is really that if we don't develop a good public transportation system that people will agree to use, we'll have to have a great many more highways. And not only highways, but a great many more parking lots. In fact, one of the points made in the study is that if we have the anticipated increase in population by the year 2000, and if we don't have rapid transit to move the people that will of necessity be coming in and out of the central core, we will have to spend probably as much as $200 million on building parking lots alone.
Right.
This doesn't cover even the cost of the roadways that are extra, nor the land.
And it doesn't even consider the biggest aspect of them all, pollution.
An obvious need for a better transportation system, public transportation system, than we have in Vancouver now. We do have buses. We do have a bus system of as inadequate as it may be. Where can we go from the point we're at now, the present bus system? How would you improve the transportation, the public transportation system in Vancouver?
Well, it's a little hard to get figures across, but I'll see what I can do. The present bus system, even using BC Hydro's inflated estimates, is something like $22 million, and this includes both Victoria and Vancouver. Now, the radio transportation system they're talking about here, they're envisaging a capital cost of at least $300 or $400 million, at least. Now, this is a capital cost which is considered to be a grant to the system. In other words, there is no hope of recapturing this cost. The fares that will be charged on the radio transportation system will just barely cover the operating expenses, if they're hoped. Now, let's just think what $300 or $400 million is. That would have to be sunk into the concrete of this particular system. This is never going to be recovered. Now, at 10% interest, $300 or $400 million would bring in a revenue each year of something like $30 to $40 million. Now, with $30 to $40 million, you're dealing with a sum of money which could be used to substantially beef up the present transportation system within Vancouver in the following way. Briefly, what I would recommend is that we double or triple the existing bus service that we have in Vancouver. And this has the advantage that it would serve any particular point in Vancouver to any other point in Vancouver. And the radical suggestion I make, which is not the first time it has been made, is that the system become toll-free. I don't say free, I mean toll-free. Now, this would then mean then that because the present bus or the present public system would be multiplied by a factor of 3 just in terms of physical facilities, the effect of making it toll-free would go beyond the factor of 3 in physical facilities. It would effectively make it a factor of 4 or a factor of 5 times better, times the present system, because it is toll-free. Let me explain. One of the reasons why buses are slow is because it takes them a long time to pick up and to discharge passengers. Now, buses are designed so that people will have to enter in single file, one at a time, so that they could each deposit their token or quarter or whatever it is under the eyes of the driver. Consequently, the doors have to be much smaller than they could otherwise be. And the doors, the only entrance door could be in the door right by the bus driver. If you're dealing with a toll-free system and you're dealing with buses which are designed for a toll-free system, you could have the whole side of the bus just open up and you could cut the pickup and discharge time by a factor of 10.
How much will the fare be, and how much of the operating costs will be borne by the users?
Well, the operating costs should be entirely borne by the users. In fact, the consultant suggests that a reasonable charge in the neighborhood of 25 or 30 cents at today's costs would probably pay enough over and above the actual operating cost to make a contribution to the cost of running buses, which would be tributary to the rapid transit system, and which
from other
themselves
areas.
would probably be losing propositions as they operate.
I'm asking you with a specific thought in mind. Since I've been to Toronto, they've had 2 or 3 increases.
Yes.
Now, it's very strange. When I spent a month in Europe this summer, I went through Munich, and I read in the local paper there that the Lord Mayor of the city has promised that when the subway is built, the first subway in Munich to be built, the second in Germany, the first one is Hamburg, it will be run free to the users.
Well, it's an interesting experiment.
Why can't we have that?
If we were to run it free, there is one disadvantage that is immediately obvious, and that is that we would have to raise that much more money from general taxation. And to some extent, this has to be considered unfair, because there are a great many people who would make very limited use of public transportation, and these would be the people who could least afford to make a contribution to other people's use of it. Elderly people, for example.
Right.
And people who are disabled.
Well, the thing is that how then would the system be paid for? Well, my recommendation is, well, the very first thing is that you take some of the $300–400 million, which is scheduled for this sort of thing, and just invest it in Canada savings bonds or in Canada treasury bonds, and just use some of the revenue from that to pay for the system, to provide direct operating benefit to the people. Another thing, this system would require something like 5, 10, 15, 20 years to be implemented. In other words, if the City Hall and all the people in West Vancouver and North Vancouver and all the suburbs got together today and said, agreed, we're going to have this rapid transit system, it would still take about 2 or 3 years to do the engineering, design work, another 3 or 4 years to let out the contracts, and another 5 or 10 years before the system is completely built and implemented. Now, what are you going to have then over the next 15 or 20 years? Well, you're going to have $300 million tied up, producing nothing useful, and actually producing something. The streets are going to be torn up. You're going to have less transportation, not more. You're going to increase the congestion, not decrease. Now, if you just make the bus transportation system toll-free and multiply it, in other words, it's not enough that it be toll-free, because the present system is inadequate. The present system really isn't designed to serve the people. It's designed to irritate people so that they so that they're encouraged to complain about it, to say, well, look, we've got to take the bus system out of BC Hydro and get it running properly and all the rest of that. And there's this element of contrivance in it. But if you to take that $300 or $400 million and put it into improving the operating facilities of the present system, then you would immediately improve the public transportation system overnight. You could order new buses and have your drivers trained within 6 months. I mean, that's all it would take. Furthermore, you don't have any capital commitment to the system. You could try a toll-free system for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and if at the end of that period of time that you decide that, well, the toll-free system is not the way that you want to go, or that it has this, the investment is not that large. I mean, you still have your buses, which have a certain useful life, and these could be sold to other cities. Your bus drivers have been paid a salary in which they've paid taxes, and they've contributed to the general economic climate of the area. And so what have you lost? What does it cost you? I mean, there's no real big investment that's involved here.
take it that you personally favor a subway.
Yes, I favor a rapid transit system as part of our overall public transportation system.
Rather than building masses of 6 and 12 and 18-line highways.
Oh, yes. Well, if you'll take Toronto as an example, perhaps it isn't practical for them to have rapid transit out where the 401 is. But the 401 is now 12 lanes wide in places.
And it's
in
still
the rush hour, it's still a
clogged.
crawl.
Right.
And then there's also the social innovation of Vancouver doing something different than that which has been done by every other city. And every other city in the world has a public transportation system for which you have to pay tolls, and in no case, I mean, have the cities been desirable places to live as a result. And why Vancouver just can't just say, well, let's throw open the city. I mean, here's skiing up in Grouse Mountain, there's Stanley Park, there's Queen Elizabeth Park, there's the Queen Elizabeth Theater, there's Wreck Beach, there's White Rock, all kinds of facilities. Why not just throw this all open to the public? And all it just takes is transportation and mobility, and give people, students, the old folks, kids, the opportunity to move freely throughout the city from anywhere to anywhere else. And then you open up, then you don't create any particular centers of glory or centers of super decay, because if the area starts going down, then there's all kinds of people that can come in and resurrect it if they've got the opportunity or the incentive to go there. But here, if you build this concrete system that you can only go to this one point of focus, then anything which happens anywhere else, which may be good or bad, well, sorry about that. You can't do anything about it, and you're on your own. And I think that the city of Vancouver has got too much going for it, just to say that, well, there's one spot in the city to which you must bring everything to a focus and open up the whole area. And I think that this might make Vancouver the one city in this world which is just really truly enjoyable, free, open, flexible city of opportunity.
Not also a fact that now is just about the last possible time to do a good job of it in the time that is remaining to us?
Well, I would say that it would be folly for the regional board, now that they've been given an indication of support from at least one of the senior governments, to delay taking action. The thing has been considered before, it's been put off. I think the general agreement that our present public transportation system is not adequate, and there must be something better, and this is our chance. If we miss this, we'll probably be put off for another 2 or 3 years. We're just that much further behind.
The preceding interviews were taken about 6 months ago, and so to find out what changes had occurred in the meantime, we went to the office of the Greater Vancouver Regional Board and spoke to Dennis O'Gorman. About 6 months ago, the Regional District Board came out with a proposal for a rapid transit system, and so my first question would be, have the ideas for that proposal changed since that came out?
Yeah, well, really, I guess I should discuss the nature of that particular study. It was a consultant study, really geared to answering one question: is rapid transit feasible in Greater Vancouver or not, and under what conditions? And the conditions were, continuing high growth, particularly in the central area, and a massive injection of money. Now, since that time, the board has embarked on a program of saying, we've got to look at, we've got to walk before we can run. And if we're going to do anything in transportation, A, we've got to have the power, and B, we've got to have some money to do something with it. So this is where our emphasis has lie in the last several months since that study was put in, so that we've embarked on a series of so-called legal and financial and administrative studies which are looking at, well, really geared around the proposition of expanding bus services into the suburban area, and part and parcel of this is the likelihood of getting any money from the provincial government that the existing BC Hydro operation will have to be regionally run. And so there's the strongest emphasis in the immediate future, which is where our studies have lied, is what can we do in terms of improving transit service, because we knew that to implement transit in a rapid transit sense was going to be an 8 to 10 year proposition, and we just couldn't allow things to deteriorate for that long. We got to start shaping transit habits now. You know, it's the issue of transit versus auto. It doesn't wait till the magic rapid transit element is on the scene. Right now the object is to get a political consensus on accepting the function of public transportation as a regional responsibility, and getting the financial participation of the senior governments to go along with this. Following that, then the specific proposals, which will have to be a lot more refined technically, things like involving closure of streets and making transit malls and exclusive bus lanes, all these things that will improve bus travel will have to be worked out, but it'll be pretty important to get a public understanding of what we're doing, and a public input, you know, the reaction of the potential riders. To date, we've only done a few technical studies that tell us, you know, in a rough way where people are living and where they're going. We did a little bit of so-called origin destination survey work this past summer, and this was used as an input into the immediate bus improvements, knowing that specific journeys weren't all that well served. For example, UBC, for example, Simon Fraser. So we've made specific bus improvement proposals to serve those major bus user areas. I used the term, we've got to walk before we can run, but we know that we're going to be walking and gradually picking up momentum as we go, so that we're going to gain operational experience if in fact we take on the responsibility for running buses in Greater Vancouver. And in light of that experience, we're going to be able to say, well, the loads are building up here or there. What sort of technical solutions to stage us into the future are going to be best, so that instead of looking at strictly a long-term solution and forgetting about what's happening right now, we've got to look at what's happening right now. How is it going to be shaping travel patterns, and what's it going to be doing in terms of meeting our longer-term objectives? For example, building up immediate bus usage in given corridors may help the day that we can stage into rail-oriented solutions, which might be faster and therefore even that much more attractive.
what you thought of the film, please.
Well, I would like to, honestly, I would like to see her being directed by someone who knows how to direct. And
In what
I
areas
didn't
do you
like the
think?
music at all.
In what areas do you think there were other room for improvement?
I just felt that I have seen better, much better, many, many times over the years.
See, the idea, the fantasy idea, the
It didn't tell you
internet.
anything. It didn't tell you anything at all. Maybe it tells it to the kids who are living that, but it sure doesn't tell it to somebody who's watching it. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much.
All the time for a story to develop.
Would you like to comment on the film, sir?
Sure. I enjoyed it. I read all the critics and they were not very good. And I enjoyed it, actually. I mean, you've got to be of a certain age and of a certain temperament to know what it's all about, but there is something in it. I think the fact that it was produced small budget and with no makeup artist, for example, the style was too good. I thought the makeup was not as good as it could have been, but I like the production, I like the direction, and I think for a bunch of people making their first films, that goes for something. And the actors, I think it was a very good effort, and probably they do a big one.
Then you know about a nervous rash.
Yes.
That's marvelous.
Okay.
Thank you. You're staying away from me. Would you care to comment on the film just as a bystander?
I can't. I just can't talk.
Yeah. What?
Other way. Who's he getting? Who's he getting? Oh, quick, grab somebody. Just anybody.
Would you care to comment on the film as a spectator?
It's very, very good. Sylvia has a lot
Did you
going.
particularly enjoy? Where do you think